Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Digital Diaries. Over the last decade, we've been told that intellectual property is the ultimate leverage. Build a course, package your knowledge, scale your expertise. But what if the models quietly collapsed? What if your real asset in business isn't your content, it's your data your content generates? Today's guest argues that we're living through what she calls the great IP to PD transition, where proprietary data, not intellectual property, is the new competitive edge. Maeve Ferguson is the former financial advisor leader turned infrastructure strategist. She engineers what she calls data funnels, systems that don't just generate leads, but capture behavioral intelligence that compounds over time. Featured in Forbes, she's worked across the globe in organizations and now helping established experts become what she calls the category of one. Wow. Maeve, welcome to the Digital Diaries.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. And it is also really lovely to have a host that also has an Irish accent. It never happens.
You've said boldly and courageously, the knowledge economy has collapsed. What do you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is if you think about the world that we've all lived in since, or what I call kind of since the 2017 days, where all you really did have to do was kind of whack up a funnel, know how to create a checkout on ClickFunnels, and you're able to make money on the internet. The journey that this world has been through since then has been very profound, especially since courses were starting to get commoditized anyway, because of course there's the copycats, there's the people who are like peddling other people's stuff, and the industry was getting kind of infested with that anyway. But with AI, what everybody has noticed is that knowledge is no longer a valuable asset. It used to be what was going on in between your two brains was one of the greatest assets that you had to bring to this world. But the problem is now is that people can collate that information, get that knowledge, understand things, build things, figure things out for themselves, and no longer actually need the knowledge that we have kind of gained over the last number of years of our career. And so what I mean by the knowledge industry is collapsing is that the things that people have been paying for years and years, they no longer have to pay for it, because you can go to Claude or whatever platform you use, ask the same question, and probably actually get a better answer that you would have done inside of a paid 2K course type thing.
Wow, that is kind of true. I use ChatGPT as a personal trainer, and the depth and insights I'm getting are
Way
are
better.
are amazing. But was there a moment when you said this wasn't working? Was it generative AI that made this, or was it kind of moving that way anyway?
I think every industry almost kind of cannibalizes itself at some point anyway. So things were definitely shifting. And it was actually in March last year. I go to quite a lot of mastermind events in the States. And last year in March, I was actually at an event where the reality of what this industry was facing came to the fore. It felt like such a privilege to be in that room, to have kind of the foresight and almost the warning as to here's what is coming. And what we then started to watch, those of us that were in the room, we started to watch over the next number of months, those who were kind of sleepwalking through life, absolutely no idea what was going on in the background, what is being built, what was coming to kind of be the biggest gotcha of it all time. And I think the marker of this, especially in the expert industry, for me anyway, is where we see the big names, when we see them starting to pedal, pivot, shift, and reinvent themselves. That's always a really good indicator. And it flows downstream as well, where you'll see, if you see the big names having to do these things, then can you only imagine what's going on at the kind of the low six figures end of the market? Okay. So what I kind of observed is that this has all been happening in the background. I'm also observing it happening for different industries. And I feel like I want to scream to everybody, like, wake up. Like media buyers, for example, we already know that there are agents. We build a lot of AI agents in our company for clients, and we already know that there are agents out there operating that are doing the entire media buying process from end to end, completely autonomous, no humans involved. And the media buying industry, they're just going about life as though it's business as normal. No idea what's going to come and get them. It's a little bit like the copywriters who's like, yeah, it's fight for, a sales page copy. You're like, wake up, those days are over. The
Yeah.
agents are able to create, when obviously there's prompting and there's all of these things that it's rubbish in, rubbish out, but it's way better than anything that they were creating anyway. And again, they're sleepwalking through life, not realizing that their knowledge and ultimately their skill and the next chapter is going to be action are just becoming valueless.
It's shocking that you're saying that because, or sorry, more that people aren't realizing it, because a friend of mine was telling me they had reached out to an executive coach and the minimum investment they were looking for from an individual was €15,000. And like they just said that the call just ended right there. They said, you've no guarantees of output and I can get really strong stuff through Gen AI on my own. And I think that that is very, very important because that 15K, like you might even argue that you're better than it, but are you 15K better than it? And can you give it on demand at the rate at which generative AI can give it?
I think it's a lovely point, and I love it. Is like, is it actually okay better? So even if your Claude sales page copy isn't exactly what a high ticket copywriter could have created, as you say, is it 30K more, or is it 30K better than what it would have been? Okay, so I love that. But what I also find is that there are going to be, it's the beauty of the world and everything being cyclical. What will eventually happen is that with AI and what's happening in the market, the mediocre people will just be eliminated. The bottom tier feeders who were just the copycats will definitely be eliminated. And what actually then happens is that the survival of the fittest, back to like very, very basic kind of, human behavior, survival of the fittest, the only people left who will be left who are going to survive and thrive are those who are actually the absolute top of their game.
I completely agree. And I think, that's a really interesting thing. I've observed at the very high business level, one of the things I was curious is why are Apple not investing more? And then only recently, Tim Cook came out and said, no, we're partnering to see who the winner in AI is. And what will probably happen is Apple will acquire someone in about 3 years' time and just go, yep, that's the one that we want.
I mean, it's exactly what happened with Manus as well. So it's like,
Yeah.
that's actually the smart play. Don't try to build this yourself. Just go and acquire the best player in the market. But it's kind of tying it all back to the expert industry. What I'm noticing, and it's not noticing, it's like what has already happened is that knowledge that used to have value no longer has value. It is accessible. You can go, I wrote this in my Substack last week. It is, you can go to, and I do this all the time, advisors, and I work with a lot of high ticket advisors, but there's certain people that I'm not currently working with, but I love their IP. I love their methodology. So I literally I work with Claude, and I work with Claude to bring me through their models, their frameworks. How would they view this? And you can literally build, I have this team of advisors on my team for annual planning, quarterly planning, monthly planning, etc. These team of advisors that act as though they are that person based on their stunning IP that is just served up for free. And that's what I mean, that knowledge is just not worth anything anymore. Obviously, the person needs to have to have the wit and the gumption to be able to go and utilize it, and know how to utilize it well, and all of those types of things. There's still a window of time for what we call the action layer. So the implementation, and this again is so personal to me because in our company, one of our divisions is done for you services. We build diagnostic assessments. We build all of the infrastructure for live events and memberships and courses and all of these things. I am run a company that does these types of things for clients. Last March, I realized the writing was on the wall because we can now build custom code websites in minutes. We're able to do custom sales proposals in seconds off the back of a call with our AI agents. So the idea here is not to say like, oh, we're all stuffed. There's no, like, action is going to no longer be valuable. Therefore, we're all finished and go and live in a field or something. We want to pivot. We want to be agile. We got to move with the times. There's not going back. So I made a very, very clear decision last March is that like, right. And it's not if my industry gets wiped off the face of the earth, but when what we do as a business ceases to exist, it's like the horse in the car. It's like it ceases to exist in that current format. What is the new going to look like? And you pivot, you be agile and you run and you do that instead. And that's exactly what we did last year. So now we're laughing because we're so far ahead of the people who are still sleepwalking and not even realizing that they're being gobbled up.
You know, when you say about the way it transitions and evolves, in my head, I was just visualizing, mainly from TV shows and stuff, but like 1950s door to door vacuum sales cleaner who would go around the States. It's like that job disappeared real quick.
And now I've got a robot in the house right now hoovering my door.
Exactly. So kind of, we're talking about this evolution, and you have a lovely phrase I mentioned in the intro, the great IP to PD transition. Walk us through that and what it means to you.
Yeah, so IP is all of our intellectual property, all of the things that we used to, like, and I'm a high ticket service provider. So it's like you're getting paid super high tickets for your intellectual property and your ability to impart that with somebody. Okay, we use it for diagnostic assessments where we take the IP out of people's brains, build it into the assessment, and it becomes a qualified lead generation machine for the company. Okay, that is all well and good, but the IP now is equal to knowledge. So the IP is just easily accessible at the tip of anybody's fingertips who knows how to ask the right questions. The difference here with the PD, the proprietary data transition, is that we are moving as an industry from IP being the valuable thing, i.e. what's between Maeve's brain, or between Maeve's ears, what's between okay, so what's going on in that brain of ours? That used to be the valuable piece. And instead of that now, it is actually about the proprietary data that we can collate and build because of our IP. Okay, and that's the most important word in that entire piece. It is the data that we can curate, aggregate, and monetize because of our intellectual property.
That is just inspiring. Working in tech myself, we constantly talk about data, data, data. But like often it's nearly used so much, it's what does it mean? But
Yeah.
why is it relevant? And I love how you're touching on it. It's like, let's turn this into data. And you've done it. Okay. So you're blazing a trail here. How did that, obviously you had the realization, but how did you actually go about that? Because that must be quite an intimidating thing to look at.
So I think it's really interesting, and I'm writing a book, kind of like getting into the thick of it in Q3, Q4 this year, and the angle has always been data. Okay, and I'm still
Hmm.
trying to figure out how to make that sexy and exciting and interesting. But leave that one with me. I'll come back and tell you about that whenever I figure out how to do that. But my angle has always been data. So I'm ex-private equity, Big Four consultant, numbers, used to be an accountant, all of those lovely things. Obsessed with data because A, data never lies. Data and numbers and our metrics tell us exactly what we need to do next. But most people, even the multi-seven-figure players in this expert space, don't have a Scooby-Doo about their numbers, what they mean, and the story that the data is telling them. So I have been very, very focused. I've been building these diagnostics or quiz funnels or whatever you want to call them for the last 7 years or so. And I have been obsessed with them from the data that they give you. Okay. So from a start rate, completion rate, conversion rates, all of the numbers that these assessments give you. And in the advent of AI, we now have these really cool agents that are analyzing automatically at the back end of these diagnostics the data that's coming through, what sort of Facebook ad copy brought through which sort of lead, and who went on to buy our multi-six-figure thing, who bought our 10K thing, who bought our, all of the different price points. And these AI agents are analyzing those leads, analyzing the conversion performance on a daily and weekly basis. Okay. And then what we're using the outputs of those agents for is to feed back to the marketing team to say, go and do more and more of this and less and less of that. Okay. So that was the premise or the kind of the realm of the data that I was focusing on. It was very, very small. It was focused only on the marketing piece. And then I'm working with a really, really, really famous client at the moment. And as we built his diagnostic there, about a year ago, we built this diagnostic. And because of who this person is, the volume of leads and buys as a paid diagnostic was absolutely colossal. And when you look at that, and this this is not, when we talk about data, we're not talking about people's names and email addresses and phone numbers, okay? This is not Zillow flogging your personal information, okay? This is not what this is. What it actually is behavioral patterns of leads and of buyers in a certain vertical. So if you think about, if you have an opt-in form, you might get a name, email address, maybe a phone number at a push. That's all you know about that lead. When somebody goes through a diagnostic assessment like Enneagram or Myers-Briggs or the happiness scale or any of these proper diagnostics, you're getting sometimes hundreds of data points on every single lead. And that's great. You're able to see their conversion, all of that sort of stuff, their IP, where they're from, their age, their gender, all of these things, as well as all of these behavioral markers, which is really cool in its own right that you know all of this data about each and every lead. But the value actually comes from the aggregate. When we roll up all of these leads together and you're able to spot patterns of behavior, you're able to aggregate, analyze, synthesize the data, all of these things, using and pulling from the public AI models as well to further enhance the value of the data. This can be packaged up in a lovely box with a ribbon tied around it and sold over and over and over and over again. The behavioral data, vertical by vertical by vertical, is the most valuable asset that people are sitting on. They already have it. They just never realized that it was worth anything.
I just love hearing that because from a sales background, I've always been, let's focus on the buyer mindset, because the buyer mindset governs what's actually going to happen. It doesn't matter how good a salesperson you're talking about, and marketing can have done a great job. If we're not aligning to what the buyer wants and sees and how they think, and, an example I always bring and think of myself is, how do I buy in business versus how do I buy outside? And that's similar, but it's not the same, because I have rules and constraints I must follow in business. And so does every buyer. So I love the industry sentiment of it. And, like financial services, say, as a whole, they're always concerned with data security, and fraud is their big one. They're always concerned about that. Whereas this is kind of tapping into it. And for something like, what you were saying is like very service based in terms of what you're doing, I can see that as so, so important to understand it and really give you quality. I'm really getting a sense of quality being important here over volume of data.
Exactly. So it's all about the quality, and it's also there's a few other considerations that are really important. So the vertical matters as well. And so say, for example, health data is like 6x more valuable than kind of normal data. But if you looked, for example, let's say in the menopause space, this is one of the ones that I'm looking at the moment. Imagine having hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of data points in the menopause space, and the health companies, the insurance companies, that would pay whatever ticket you name to get access to that data, to understand 100 and something data points across every single lead in that realm of the people that they're trying to sell to and they're trying to serve. So that is definitely one piece. And then one other thing that's really coming up is who's this going to work for? Okay, because there's no, if you have 16 followers on Instagram and you post once a month and you have 7 leads in your business, probably not the right place. So the whole idea here is that this is for either, so one of two people, either like the example of my client earlier that I mentioned, where they have just everything they put out their market are gobbling it up. Even if it's a paid product, doesn't matter. They just are devouring everything they put out there. They already have the following. They're already the authority. These are not people who are trying to get leads and clients. Leads and clients are the byproduct of the diagnostic. That's taken as a given, but it's the data play on the back end that is super, super valuable. And one thing I really, really love here as well is like a lot of thought leaders, especially at that upper end of the market, a lot of experts at the upper end of the market, they're not necessarily doing things anymore just from a monetary point of view. They're already super successful. And the whole idea here is that the data is a monetizable asset to a very, very, very high level, depending on your vertical, depending on the quality of your data, depending on the volume of your data. But the whole idea here, and how I reframe this for people who are impact driven rather than worrying about the $100 million they're going to get for their data, is that the revenue revenue that comes off the back of the data actually allows them to fulfill on their mission. It allows them to have even greater impact, because if you don't have to keep peddling on Instagram and, doing all the TikTok dancing and all of that stuff to try to keep revenue coming into your business so that you can have the impact that you're dreaming of, this revenue, it allows you to actually have greater impact in a passive way, because you're generating the leads and the data and all of these behavioral patterns anyway. The whole idea then is that you can use that should you wish, or you can go and lie at a beach, whichever you fancy. But it's like, if you want to actually have that greater impact, you can use that revenue to go and serve and help more people. So that's kind of one batch of people that this works really well for. And then the second batch would be more like a client that we have in the sports industry, where it's much more quiz funnel based. So it's not like an Enneagram type thing. It's quiz funnel based, short, fast, snappy, but they're running up to $1 million a month in ads. Okay. So ridiculous number of leads coming through into that business, an insane amount of data, highly, highly valuable asset that they are sitting on, and realizing that this is a monetizable asset is so important.
It sounds so obvious, okay, when you say it. And you yourself are a case in point. You prove what you're talking about. What's holding people back from going ahead with this?
I think most people have absolutely no idea that it's a thing. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, what? I didn't know this. I didn't realize this. It's not a common topic. It's not something. So unless you're, like, as you said earlier, from your corporate play where all they talk about is data because they know that that's all that matters. If you're not in that world, you don't get that. And again, a lot of people in the expert industry, a lot of them haven't come from that background. So they're not necessarily understanding what's driving this world, and what drives this world is data. So most people, kind of funny rule, there's going to be this, they just didn't even know it was there. Second thing is, interestingly, from a market, because I'm a marketer, a digital marketer, run a marketing agency, all of those things, it's a very interesting play because it's not actually solving for any pain point. Okay. It's completely aspirational. It is all upside. The data is being gathered anyway. Okay. So the only missing piece is like, well, how the heck do you monetize it? How would it actually? That's the piece that is missing. So it's like, for those that have the audience, it is just the infrastructure to plug in to then, because the people are coming through anyway, use it as the conversion machine. The leads and clients are a given. And then the data play is the big piece of the back end. That how would this even work, or how would I do it, is the greatest question that we get. So those are kind of the two main things. And then at a more general level and societal level would be kind of like people who don't get what data monetization is. So they're like, oh my goodness, I can't sell my phone number. And it's like, it's not that. So I think that's a big part for me, is explaining to people and bringing it down to layman's terms as well, that it's like, this is not about flogging your email address. Like, that's worth $1.
Yeah. Do you know, you're making me think of a customer I worked with a few years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, and they had an online B2B commerce site. And so they were in a trade and they had a warehouse. So, tradespeople would order bits and pieces off them and come and collect them. The only piece of information that they consistently held was the person's email address and nothing else. And then when he looked at it after 18 months trading, he was doing 1.8 million on that website, and where people were just coming and collecting, and he knew nothing. He had no context for it.
That would be millions of dollars if he had data points on them.
This is it. Now, as soon as we did manage to open this person's eyes and they went, yeah, I made a mistake here. I should have done this, because he was trying to cost save. And that's exactly what happened. And do you know what? I'll give the guy credit. At least he just said, yeah, I'm going to fix it now, because there's too much opportunity and I've gone wrong. And
sleepwalk through life.
Well, look, at least someone makes the change, but it was just so obvious to us when we were talking to him, going like, you need to do this. And I said, you'll make the buying experience easier. And then I have to ask you, and this is just something that came up in my personal life separately when we're talking about data and what's worth collecting. What? So a group of Irish radio stations have an app, and they are very insistent on you signing up for the app, and they're looking for you to fill out a full profile, which I actually find really off-putting, because as far as I'm concerned, if I was in my car listening to an FM radio, you know nothing about me other than I'm listening to it in the car.
Yeah.
I understand why they want it, but should they give users the space not to be able to listen just without doing it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a brilliant question. So what come up for me there as you were asking the question is it's like they didn't share the value to you as to why you would want to do this. Because if you think about any opt-in of any description, it's just like, are you worth my email address? Like, is this, is the value of what I'm going to receive from you in this exchange where I'm giving you my details, you're giving me a thing, is that value exchange worth it? For this radio app, your feeling was like, no, we're just gonna listen to my car. Okay. So that's
Yes,
one
exactly.
thing, right? But the beauty of diagnostics, and this is why I fell in love with diagnostics years ago and why I will die on a hill about them. I hang my hat on our top of funnel marketing. Everything is about the diagnostic. And the reason being is that the value you receive when you go through, like we're talking about going through a diagnostic like the happiness scale by Dr. Arthur Brooks or Enneagram or Myers-Briggs, the value of what you get as a participant in that diagnostic far outweighs any issue you have about telling them your data points. Okay, because so this is like it has to be the juice has to be worth the squeeze. The thing that we are giving them has to outweigh that resistance that you felt to giving your name and email address and filling out a profile. Because you can bet your bottom dollar they probably have an AI agent scraping that at the back end to create
Yeah.
profiles and ads and all of these different things to get more and more listeners based on the behavioral profile of the people who are already listening. That's exactly what they're doing. The piece that they missed is that they didn't articulate the value exchange well enough that you were just like, I don't care, I want this.
Yeah, and that was it. I saw I was getting nothing for it, and I discussed it with one of my mates, and it was totally where they came up with. Now, you've also said that AI didn't just disrupt the industry; it accelerated the implosion. What do you mean by that?
So if you look at what was happening in the course creation industry, for example, and just for listeners for context, I had the 10K group coaching program, I had 9 digital courses, I had the 997 courses, all the 47s with the bumps and the OTOs, ran that type of business for years and years successfully. Okay. But this is not me coming in on my high horse saying like, oh, you should have known better. I was in that industry doing exactly that for years and years and years. And again, it just ties back to the knowledge collapse. What we saw is it was starting to limp along anyway. And you see all of the big guns trying these brand new tactics because it used to be the webinar and then it was the automated webinar. And then it was like, no, we got to go back to live. And then we did like live. Let's pretend we're live, but we're not really live. And then we do like, right, it's memberships, it's courses, it's live events, it's this, it's that. So every single iteration, there is something as remember Clubhouse? How many
Yep.
did that last for, right? So shiny new morning, the market floods to it next, and then they go on to the next thing. So I've been observing over the number of years is even at the big guns, and then as I said earlier, it all filters down to the lower end of the market, where if the big guns are having to pivot and shift and alter what they're doing that frequently, there's something fundamentally wrong. So it was starting to limp along. And yes, there are edge cases where, well, so-and-so's doing really well and so-and-so's doing really well. Of course, there's always going to be edge cases. But for the masses, the underlying sentiment is that this industry is changing, and you'll see a big narrative now about in-person events, live events. Like I do a lot of VIP days, I do VIP days in person, I go to a lot of in-person masterminds. So people are still investing in certain things, but the thing that they're paying for is not video lessons on the internet. Because it takes you so dang long to watch the video. Claude can give you the sexy answer in 4.5 seconds. So you're not going to sit and watch an hour-long training, okay?
No.
So then what I mean by AI has accelerated the implosion of it is that was limping along anyway. Then enter ChatGPT. People were like, oh my goodness, look at this thing. Again, beginner level mindset started to get excited about it. The acceleration of that in the last 12 months has been terrifying, frightening, fabulous, amazing, all of those feelings all at once. But what it has done is literally made that knowledge economy an absolute, that knowledge is no longer has any value attached to it. The next piece, and this is the piece, so people sleepwalk through that piece. People are currently sleepwalking through the action piece. So people are currently still paying for action. We have a done for you agency. All we build everything for our clients who don't either want to or have the time to or whatever it may be. We build all of these assets for them. And that also has a finite, it has an end date as well. Again, 80-20 rule, there are going to be certain pieces that these, you can literally just hop onto Claude. That's going to be your interface to the universe. And it's like, I need you to buy my groceries, off you go. Like I've
Yeah.
read AI agents that can do these types of things. But you're suddenly not even going to need to know how to build the agent to do it. Even we have a smart scale as like the agentic AI division of our business that we build agents for clients. That also has a shelf life because
Yeah.
this is improving so rapidly. And even the change in the last 6 months, it almost takes a team just to keep on top of it. But it will get to the stage where you don't even need to have a brain to build an agent because you just tell it what you want and boom, it spits out the back end. So action is also going to become a valueless, commoditized thing. And then this is why it's like, right, what is the next play? What is the next move? What is the only moat that is left standing? The only moat left standing is what we actually own, what the algorithms don't own. The data that we collect inside of our companies is the last moat.
That's really interesting, and because I love this because you're highlighting both the opportunity and the threat of AI in a way that is not scaremongering. We're not saying like AI is here to take your jobs. It's like there's a risk and we got to work with that risk because it ain't going anywhere. And I think that's the thing people need to really
Yeah,
get comfortable with.
exciting. It's like opportunity. Like I could have like last March, like, well, I'm finished. Let's go and like hide under a rock, or say like, oh my goodness, is not the most exciting chapter of the universe to ever have lived in ever. Imagine what we actually have at our fingertips here. Let's go figure out a way and come up with a solution that is 50x better than what we were doing in the old way.
Completely. Although I want to kind of put the personal side into it. You mentioned Arthur Brooks, and he, for listeners, just benefit. We're learning and learning and learning up to the age of 35, and then we move into fluid intelligence over 35 and kind of more wisdom. So not that we can't learn new things, but it becomes more challenging for those, I'll say over 35s, but even as it gets older, it becomes more solidified. Is there a barrier there of, does a person need to really consciously go, the world has just changed, and say I'm 45, I still, I'm well into the wisdom era,
Yeah.
but I also have 20 to 30 years ahead of me. They got to make it an effort, right?
100%. So this is a stunning question, and it's making the reason, if you're watching this video, the reason that I'm smiling is so I'm married to a farmer.
Okay.
And in my company, we build agentic AI, and my husband would not know how to turn on a computer with a gun to his head. Okay? It is making me laugh because he's like, this TV won't turn on. Can you turn it on? That type of farmer. Okay. So literally, and I'm like, oh man, don't ever let me get hit by a bus because like, how are you going to get through the rest of your life? So there are those types, and I've, lost cause. I'm not even going to try with him. But to me, this ties back to all it is curiosity. If you doesn't matter if you're 95, 85, whatever, I'm 43. It's like you have to
Great
be,
age, 43.
yeah, that's the norm. Yeah. Kind of depressing. I'm like, I still think I'm 16. But anyway,
Yes.
but it is you have to be curious. You have to be excited by this. It's like the things that we are building at the minute, and I'm literally building this thing, and I'm like, I can't believe I just built that. It is just mind-boggling. So don't see it as a threat. Just see it as the most glorious opportunity that you've ever been served up with on a plate, that you have infinite amount of knowledge at your fingertips. And people are like, oh, well, look, what do I do? How do I get started? Just start having conversations. My favorite thing is, I say this to my clients all the time, the favorite things I get from them is this like, Maeve, no idea if this would be possible, but it would be really cool if. And that is my favorite thing to receive, because then I'm just like, ooh, I can go and play. My team, I an amazing team that are like running the company, doing all of the things. So I then get to go and play, idea, design, troubleshoot, build all of these things. And then it becomes a thing that we can monetize and sell to clients, which is really cool. But those are that curious mind that if you're sitting there and you're like, hey, right, all I have are my courses and I've just realized that I'm like, this is not valueless, okay? And I know I still might have an 18 months to 2 year window left in the action piece, okay? You're like, right, what do I do? It's just literally jump on, not a big fan of ChatGPT, just jump on a Claude and just it's literally use a tool called Whisperflow. So this is a writer down, and this will literally change your life. Use Whisperflow. You literally just talk. All I do all day now is just talk to my computer. It even understands my accent, which is highly exciting. And it's like I just Whisperflow to Claude all day, every day. And I have, 17 different work streams for different projects, for different clients running in the background. And I'm just literally chatting to it. And it's just like, this is what I want. And they give me, no, that's not exactly what I meant. What I meant was this, da da da. And you
Yeah.
just have that confidence. So don't be scared of it. Just go and play, build the ontology of your company, build all of this stuff out piece by piece by piece, starting with the greatest bottleneck in your business. That's it.
I love starting back with curiosity on it because when I first used Gen AI of all the platforms and I was trying them, I was like, this is crap. Like, this is just like another form of Google search. I'm not getting anything. And I said, no, I'm doing something wrong here. This is on me. Let's go back to what this can do because search has already been defined. And I started embracing it and going, well, how is this going to make a difference and where is it? And, just recently in my day job, there was a process that as we've outgrown it, put it that way. It's not that it was wrong and that it was designed, but our needs have changed. And I was like, I need to build this out again. And I just said, here's what I'm doing, because I had to use Gemini from the corporate side. I said, here's what we're doing. Help me brainstorm what this should look like now. And I probably got through what would take me about 90 days with team
100%.
members to get through in under 2 hours. And now I have a wholly new defined process, a way of doing things that I'm going to like pitch to my manager. And then it's going to be basically how we do things.
Exactly. That's all it is. It's just like here, I literally this morning we have this sales artifact process where we have a call, we have a 2 call close process because our stuff's kind of high ticket. So our agency director hosts call number 1. If they tick the box, they're qualified leads. They're ready then to move to get a proposal. Do you remember the days of proposals? Like I used to work in Ernst & Young and you spent like months in this thing and then you didn't even win the gig. It's like we're literally, so she hangs up that call. We have an AI process in place that it creates a web page, like it looks like a website, completely personalized to the person, built with a very, very specific proposal, skill sets, persuasion language, all of those things. It's branded in their colors, and we're able to literally go through. It might take 3 or 4 forward and back for refinement at the back end, and then we're able to get that second call. And the reaction from leads who are like, how on earth did you do that? And it just raises the bar. So instead of the standard, let me send you a PDF or all of that kind of ordinary, what I call like 1997 stuff, it is just everything gets more elegant, everything is elevated, everything is sophisticated, it's fast, and it's done in minutes. Whereas you would have been paying team members hours and hours and hours to pull together these things. What we're able to spit out with the agent is actually 10x the quality and takes like 100th of the time.
I love that. And I think what you touched on is a beautiful point in sales as well, is that if you actually tell a prospect something they care about, the response is totally different. Suddenly you're someone they want to talk to.
Like, here's
And
my thing, and here's why me. Nope, it doesn't work like that.
no,
It has to be about them.
always. Now, you mentioned earlier that an email is worth about $1 in terms of a data point, but you've also said that 40 structured data points could be worth hundreds. How does it compound in that way?
Essentially, it depends on your vertical. Okay, so
Okay.
one use case for as an example, and with the caveat, because I am not a blow smoke type of person, but with the caveat, health data is about 6x more valuable than kind of what we would call standard data. 40,000 rows of data, aggregated, analyzed, all of the things, sold for $340 million. Okay, we have another client that I'm working with. We already built this diagnostic. We're now moving into the data play. We've had a valuation. We're still in process, so this hasn't happened yet, but we're still in process. And the diagnostic is brand new. 500 people through it. Aggregated data over buyer behavior over the last number of years. Email aside, with 14,250K. Okay, so it just, there's a range in there and it depends, but even just hearing those couple of examples, start to think about your own email list size, start to think about your audience size, start to think about the diagnostic that we built for a client that I mentioned earlier that did 60K of sales in its first month. It was like a $14.99 assessment. Okay, so you can do the math on the number of purchasers times hundreds of data points on every single lead going through that thing. The valuation of that is in that range. So think of your own data points as like, what's your email list size? What do you have? What do you not have? Are we just have opt-in forms and that's it? The big decision today is what other pieces of data are you going to start to gather, because that is
Yeah.
actually a valuable asset.
It's really, really interesting. And I want to push on the health one a little bit because you've got me really curious on that. So immediately I'm thinking pharmaceuticals, insurance companies want all that. But you also, you mentioned menopause data is huge. But I'm straight away thinking now, gyms. So we are at the end of the generation where ladies just do cardio in the gym. And we're really trying to get women strength training.
I do strength training every single day, every day.
Absolutely love to hear that. But how are gyms going to leverage this? Because I think there's a massive angle there. And I will say I've really noticed the younger generation, like the Gen Zs, the 18 to 24-year-olds are flooding the gym. But
Yeah.
our generation there could be more of us. There's not none of us, but there definitely could be
We
more.
could do better.
Yeah.
We could do better. Yeah, so there's a couple of angles here. One is the fact so you mentioned kind of the different people who buy data. The beauty of it is, and sometimes when it's these like ginormous numbers like that, it's like it's exclusive, and that's why it is, getting so, such a high ticket selling point. But the whole idea here is that you can actually sell this data or monetize this data across various different buyers. So you aggregate the data once and then you sell it to you and you and you and you and you. It's the same piece of data, but different pieces, different kind of avenues. There's institutional investors, there's just AI companies, everything, or like they're buying this data and you can sell it over and over again whenever you have the right kind of broker process in place. But back to kind of your question about the gym is like, so if you know, and this is why building your diagnostic correctly is so critical, because there's no point in, say for example, you're doing a health one, okay, and you're aggregating the data on gender, age, location, strength training habits, cardio habits, eating habits, all of these different points, BMI, all of the things, okay. Your output of your data, the value of the data to a gym, for example, or to my PT or whatever it may be, the value of that data only has value if we've asked the right questions to get the right outputs in the first place. And this is the big piece. The diagnostic has to be the right diagnostic. We have to ask the right questions to therefore create the right data points that these companies actually want to get.
Final question, and then we'll wrap up. So someone listening, you've given them the little bit of fire under the belly that got their business was built on IP alone.
Yeah.
What's their next 90 days look like to pivot?
Yeah. So next 90 days is pop the hood on your business. If you don't already know all of the metrics in your business, what you're gathering and about whom, that is the very first thing you want to do. If you're gathering nothing, you want to then design out, right, okay, if you are, if you're going to consider this data play, what vertical am I in? Who are the buyers of data in my vertical? What do they want? Okay, so it's the same, still sales. Okay, it's like they want something, we have something. That's what sales is. Okay, so what do they actually want as it relates to your vertical? So let's say you're in real estate or dentistry or whatever it may be. What are the things that they would want to know? And then from there, you craft your diagnostic, your assessment, whatever it may be, to ask the questions that will spit out those data points. And even I said this to a client on a call last night, even if we're not planning for this data play in the next even 3 quarters, let's build it with the end in mind, assuming that a year from now, this is part of the play. So you want to set yourself up for success from the start. Don't go, oh, I wish I had a such and such, and then you're back to day zero. So even if it's not a remote intention right now, even if you don't have a clue how you would even start, set yourself up as day zero today, gathering it, all of the things, so that when that play comes to the fore for you further down the road, when everybody starts talking about this as like the new big thing, you're actually ready and you're not starting as day zero then.
That makes a lot of sense. So what struck me in this conversation today is that It's not about tactics as infrastructure and process. And as we move from intellectual property to proprietary data, it's not just a trend, it's a reordering of how things work in the economy. And what people need to understand is that if they don't shift early, they might not survive it, but if they do, they'll define what the future looks like. If listeners could take one thing from you today, what would you like that to be?
You are already sitting on this asset. You've just never you never seen it or realized that it actually is an asset. So pop the hood on it, have a look at what you have, and if you want to kind of chat through how could this work in your specific case, just reach out to us on LinkedIn or whatever, and then we can just kind of explain how it would work in your specific case.
Well, we'll put the show notes, the website and your website in the show notes so as people can reach out to you and get in touch. It has been a wonderful conversation, Maeve. Thank you so much for being on the Digital Diaries.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Love the conversation.
Pleasure.